Hey, welcome to the show. I'm here today with Caron Stace Railly. Caron, hello. How are you?
Very good. How are you, Sanjay?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. Really, really appreciate it. And it is, I know a lot of people know you as Karen, right? And I think we even called you that back in the day, but it's actually
Yeah,
Caron.
yeah. It's a French name. It means I tell people think turn the car on.
Turn the car
Car
on.
on, yeah. Yeah, I'm not really that fussed. It became more of an issue now that I live in Australia, where they'll say Karen like that, and
Mm.
I'm like, yeah. But with a British accent, Karen, Caron, they sound pretty similar.
Okay. And we also used to call you Stacker.
Yeah, that's an old nickname, but actually a guy I used to work with a company called House Splendid started calling me Stacker because people couldn't get my last name right, so I'd go
Mm.
by my surname, and at the time it was just Stace. And another Australian I worked with said, "Oh, Stace in Australia is Stacker," and then everyone started calling
Yeah.
me Stacker, and I kind of
Yeah.
liked it.
So, look, before we get carried away, a brief little introduction to you. So, you've had over 20 years of career working in design and primarily the sort of UI UX track before it was even called that. You know, you've been like a web designer, interaction designer, visual designer, so on and so forth. Then in the sort of 2010s when UI and then UX sort of became recognized as a title, you picked up those titles. So,
Yeah, definitely. It
this
was
is,
probably a little bit before when I actually started working for House Splendid. So I'd say it's probably about 2008 when I sort of came into the UX understanding of what UX was. I think even
mm,
before then, people were calling it human computer interactions.
yeah, yes, I remember that. And human centered design and all that,
Yes,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, essentially, what I'm trying to say is you are UI UX through and through. Um, you've throughout your career, you worked primarily or almost entirely only as a contractor or freelancer at something like over 20 of the top brands in the UK and Australia. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, that's
So,
probably my LinkedIn doesn't even have them all. I used to try and record them all, but then some places I may have only worked like a week or something, so it may have not and may have just fallen off the
yeah.
radar. But yeah, no, I was lucky enough. I think contracting is a great way to, get your tool belt and get a great portfolio and work in different places. Definitely, yeah.
Absolutely, completely agree. And then you go to Software Bootcamp about 6 or 7 years ago now, whatever it was, and that's where we meet.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, you've moved on. You've got a lot of marketing experience, and you've now spun up your own company,
Mm-hmm.
helping other creators launch their own businesses. And it's kind of like a full service kind of startup you've got there, which is really interesting and amazing. We're going to be talking about your bootcamp experience and what you're doing now with your own company. So before we get to actual bootcamp, lead me up to what takes you there. You know, what motivates you to go there, and where are you in your
Yeah,
life at that point?
to be quite honest, I was really frustrated. Being a designer, ideas were like coming to me all the time. Like, I got this great idea for an app, I got a great idea for a website. And I felt quite frustrated with my lack of ability to make them a reality. I had even, paid people to in overseas to try and make my ideas come alive, and I would even get frustrated with that process. So for me, it was definitely born out of frustration. I would say very naive frustration, though, to think that I could, do a boot camp and walk away and produce amazing digital products on my own. Was kind of, it was a bit of naivety, but a great experience in itself. So a big learning curve for me.
So your motivation then going into bootcamp is to pick up these tech skills to be able to build your own products.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I had some, great ideas which I'd, designed up, prototyped, and thought I just need to get this live. And I suppose there was also this fear that most people would probably come off that, digital products cost a lot of money. And I'm a big believer in the lean process and keeping things as cheap and lean as possible. And I really didn't want to be going out there and putting like my retirement money into building, an app or a digital product and have it not pan out. So I thought the solution was, learning to code myself and being like the full person who does everything from literally design, build, sales, marketing, and then I can just have this digital business out there in the world. And I didn't have a particular idea at that point in time. I'd definitely been through there were a few solid ideas which I'd designed up, but I just knew that I wanted to run my own business and be more self-sufficient. So that was my desire. Yeah.
And I mean, there's a ton of crossover between UI, UX, and engineering anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost felt like you were kind of heading in that direction, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like I thought that it was going to be a lot easier than what it was, because I'd been working in the industry probably. I mean, let's say I fully went out into the world about year 2000 as sort of like a web designer in New Zealand was my original starting. I must have moved to London about 2004, and then was working kind of a mixture of graphic design, web design sort of stuff. So I've been in the industry a very long time. So I had this probably a little bit of false confidence there that, I can just tack on this other skill and, become a programmer and then become a, CTO or something. So, that was kind of my thoughts behind it. And I also felt, it would just be nice. I think also when I left, like I was originally born in New Zealand, when I left New Zealand, it was a very much a jack of all trades industry. This is like early 2000s. And it was, you were expected to do everything. You're expected to be able to, even they weren't really designing, like when I moved to London, everything's like designed in Photoshop and then handed off to a developer. There wasn't that in New Zealand. There wasn't that process. It was just kind of like, all right, make a website, tap, 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 tap to get your HTML out or your Dreamweavers out or your Macromedia Flash. Was it Macromedia?
Yeah.
I had a Macromedia
It was.
pen for years. I went to something and I was like so proud of this pen. It was like, you just go in and you just do it. And that's the way I was taught, like out of university. You just go in and you just make something, So moving to London, it was a whole new experience of learning that, there are different compartments. So I think ultimately moving to London, I thought it was going to be just for a couple of years. And I thought, ultimately I'll probably move back to New Zealand or Australia. I have Australian citizenship as well. So I knew I was going to come back this side. And I expected that kind of downgrade of having to be a jack of all trades and being expected to do everything again. So there was that kind of in me as well, that like if I want to move back to this side of the universe, I'm probably going to be expected to do everything. And to be honest, it is a little bit like that still in some places in Australia here, but not as much so. I think people realise that they're very different disciplines and you need to, design and you need to code and you need to do these things separately. And, having somebody who's a jack of all trades means that you're probably not going to get the best of anything, really, ultimately.
And I think that experience is many people's experience, right?
But, totally. I think for me, the biggest learning is that they're totally different parts of the brain. Like, you got your left brain people who are more into maths and more logical, and you got your right brain people. I do think that most people are a mixture of both, but I would say I'm very much predominantly right-brained brain person. Like I'm a visual person. Like even spelling words to this day, if I'm going to spell something, I can't spell it in my head. I have to write it down. So I'm that visual. Right. So like if somebody's like spelling a word to me, I'm like, quick, get a pen, because I'm such a visual person that I've got to see the letters. I can't like visualize the letters in my head. So I think when it came to programming, I'm like, it felt like a whole new dimension, like literally, it was just, and I was having these weird dreams. I'm like, I'm going into this dimension where there's no visuals, but it's all like numbers and letters, but it exists. I remember thinking this, we did a plane assignment. I think it was our first assignment. We had to make planes land and, and I was just like, the planes are there, but they're not really there. Like that's how I felt. I'm like, the code says the planes are there, but I can't see the planes. So it was a real. I found it difficult not being able to see, and I think because I'd done a lot of HTML before, I didn't realize it was going to be that difficult. Because HTML is simple, like you get visual feedback straight away, but with programming, I didn't see any visual feedback. When you're just sitting there looking at code, there wasn't that visual feedback that I think I needed.
So we've tiptoed around the subject of bootcamp a little, but now let's really get into it. This was really surprising to me when you kind of told me about your experience. So now take me through your experience. I mean, what happened for you at bootcamp?
Yeah, it's a miracle that I didn't drop out, really. Like it was
Really?
yeah, it was incredibly hard. Like I say, I really felt like my brain was going to a different dimension, and it was something I really wanted to draw pictures of the code or do something and have visual feedback. Like I really needed that. I did yeah, and that was the bit that I think was so surprising to me, is that I didn't have that like I expected with HTML, I suppose, that I didn't have I'll change the CSS and bang, on the screen there's something visual there. And I didn't numbers and letters to me didn't solidly represent something. I'm that much of a visual person. So it was like a whole dimension shift for my brain, I would say. So really, really, I found it really difficult. Yeah, and saying that, it was a learning curve. Like there was a lot of good things that came out of it, and one was probably resilience, because I really wanted to kind of quit a lot. Like I wanted to quit, and I don't really know what kept me in there, because I kind of knew that I was never going to be a programmer when I was doing the course, but I think it was just that I'm not really a quitter. So I couldn't bring myself to leave, and to quit and say, oh, well, that was a mistake. I thought, well, I'm still going to get something out of this, even if I decide that programming's not right for me. Yeah.
Because we were in the same cohort together at the same boot camp, and at no point did I think, oh, Karen's like, sorry, I'm calling you Karen now.
It's okay.
Caron's in like a bad way, or like
Really?
she's. Yeah, I just thought, well, we were all struggling. It was hard for all of us, and I thought, well, like the rest of us, she's plodding along.
Wow. I must have hidden it really well. I think I do have a very much. I remember when we got to our end assignment, and there was kind of there was a bit more camaraderie there of, let's just try and tackle this, and let's just try and there was a lot of posting on Stack Overflow and asking questions and getting help from external people and that sort of thing. But I suppose for me, I think I like a problem, and I think maybe that's where I did thrive in it. Like I enjoy the problem solving aspect of it, even though I don't think I was very good at problem solving myself, but I would like to find the answers and thinking, okay, now what's the next problem that we've got to solve? Whether the answer to that is posting on Stack Overflow or wherever that's coming from, the problem solving aspect of it was probably what really kept me going, I suppose, because I'm a problem solver. If a problem comes up, I have to solve it, which means lots of
Great.
sleepless nights.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But yeah.
So tell me about your first few experiences then that you remember about boot camp, and when do you start to get a sense that this is not what you want?
I wonder if it was even day. I think the first week. Yeah, because I think, I don't want to mention names. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we were supposed to pair up, and then I didn't have a pair, so somebody else from somewhere else helped, said, I'll be your pair. And then he got really angry at me. So,
Oh no.
he said, you need to play around, and I can't even remember what it was called, IRB, and sort of
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
threw the keyboard at me and said, you don't know what you're doing. You need to play around in this and work
No
out what you're
way.
doing. Yeah. And then I was just like, I think it
Oh
might
my
have been
gosh.
day 3. And I was like,
Wow.
okay. And I think I went out crying. And I just walked out of the room crying, going like, what have I done? What have I done? And I didn't turn up the next day. Yeah. And that was like day 4. So I was kind of like, okay. And I felt like, and I suppose inside my head, that made me feel like everyone was way, 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 way ahead of me. And I was like, oh, because I struggled to do, we had a pre-assignment before doing it. I struggled to do that pre-assignment as well. But I thought, I'll be all right when I get there, because I'll learn it when I get there. And then I was like, oh, but I'm not learning it. But I'm not getting there. But yeah, and it's interesting because I must have learned an awful lot in that boot camp, that programming. But I think I have I retained that information? No. And why not? Because I didn't want to.
Really?
Yeah, like I just know that coding's not for me. And whenever I'm in a situation, so do
Mm,
you want to do a bit of program? I say, look, like it's not, I don't want to program it. And I think that's perfectly okay in life to know that, to know
mm,
where
mhm,
your limits are and where you should be and where you shouldn't be. And that's, do you know what? I think that's almost what life is about, is knowing who you are and what your limits are and where you can go with it. Like that's life. That's what you've got to work out in life, you know. Um, your path often changes as well. You're not always on the same path. You know, you might decide this is the right way for me, and then all of a sudden it veers off this way and you have a great opportunity that way. And that's what life is. So, you know, making a decision that maybe wasn't suited to me was a massive internal learning experience for myself, which has probably headed me off on a different tangent as well to what it could have done or would have done. And it means, you know, when I'm going for a job, they're, oh, you know, how are you with programming? I'm like, well, do you know what? I really don't like it. So hands up, I don't think it's going to be the right thing for me. You don't have to put your hands up for everything in life. You don't have to say, yes, I'll do it. You know, it's important to know what you want and where your boundaries are. Like that's important. And yeah, that's been a big learning lesson for me, definitely.
I absolutely agree 100%. But, I should hasten to add for anyone watching or listening that you did complete the course successfully.
Yeah,
You,
I did, yeah, and yeah, I think things got a lot better. Like definitely, they you know, I started to understand things and be able to program. By the end of it, I could program, and it definitely, you know, it definitely amazingly that you can learn to program in 12 weeks. It just, I think the learning curve for me was that I didn't want to program, which is
yeah, yeah.
which is a you know,
It's perfectly fine, as you say. I
yeah,
mean, there's a lot of
totally.
things that everyone.
Yeah, totally, totally.
Can I just say that I had no idea about that experience you described
Okay.
on day three,
Yeah,
and that's absolutely unacceptable on every level.
yeah.
And it doesn't only. I mean, it happens to experienced engineers as well.
Mm,
There are cultural problems all the time. There are behavioral problems from people, and it's unacceptable always. And we always try and address and fix that.
yeah, totally.
I understand that you think coding is not for you. I totally get it. But to what extent do you think that particular experience, kind of
Oh,
somewhere
yeah.
down there,
Oh, yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, I've never, it's interesting because I've never thought about it. But yeah, you're quite right. I was new. I was, you know, coding
yeah,
was a new thing, and I thought I was going to be a walk in a park, and it wasn't. And yeah, I had a bit of friction there. So yeah, you're quite right. It could have it could be could totally be a mindset thing. It could have just set my
mm,
mindset into thinking I'm never going to be any good at this. So I decided I was never going to be any. Who knows? Like
yeah,
that is a great point. And am a strong believer in our mindset also molds our lives in such a big way, doesn't it?
absolutely,
So yeah, little
absolutely.
experiences like that can, and you know, like it's funny because I always had I have a memory of something that happened to me when I was like 5 years old, where a school teacher was yelling at me. And I became apparently really shy and introverted after that experience. And I spent all of my childhood thinking I was a shy person. I was quite quiet and quite shy. And then all of a sudden, when I moved to the UK, I think I was about 26 at the time when I moved to the UK, I just became really loud and obnoxious person. And it's like maybe it was something to do that I was just holding this belief about myself for
Mm,
who knows, 20 odd years. And then leaving the country, it was like living in a country where I didn't have those preconceived beliefs on me. I just sort of maybe came out of my shell a little bit. I mean, I've always wondered about that. So that's a really good point that you make, because I'm a strong believer that the smallest things can turn your brain in a certain way that can actually
mm.
completely affect your entire life. Yeah, definitely.
And it may continue to not to be something that you're not interested in pursuing professionally, but there could be something there that you can overcome a little thing,
Yeah,
a win for
I
yourself.
must admit, I did do a little bit of programming in a PDF file recently.
Hey,
You
nice.
can in PDF files, so people can add things and certain things calculate or add up. And I struggled with it because I'm not particularly good at maths either. And I did it. And then it was a little like fist pump in the air because I felt this feeling of, oh my God, I did it. Like, even though I hated this and I hated doing everything about it, I did a little bit of code and I managed to get it to work. And it was like, yeah, this little fist pump of, wow, I've managed to get this to work. But I'd be like,
And you,
in future, I'd outsource it because they'll do it so much quicker than me.
but there's nothing like quite crafting things yourself, is there?
Yeah, like that's another reason why I think, especially the word Makers Academy really drew me in, because I'm a maker, I'm a creator, I always have been. I love, like, when when you launch an app or you launch a website and you launch it and you're looking at it and it's live for everyone to see, that's a buzz, man. That's a proper buzz.
Oh, yeah.
I get a real feeling off that, to complete something and have something up there, and to or have it even making money, or, like I've worked on some UX projects where, like, we looked at the conversion rate of the site and it was like, below 1%. We do our design tweaks. 3 months later, that's like hitting 5% conversion, that website. It's like humming over at 5%. It's like, yeah, like we made big business difference, with what we've done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you consider maybe pair programming with me at some point? And, I'll promise to be nice to you.
No. Thanks for the offer, though. I'll do more podcasts, but no programming.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. I'll hold you to that. If you're enjoying this podcast, make sure to check out Electronic Specifier Insights. Their editors dig into the electronics industry, how new tech is shaping our post-COVID world, reviews from all the top electronics shows, and the latest tech electronic companies are releasing. You can find them by searching for Electronic Specifier Insights on any streaming service or by going to electronicspecifier.com/news/podcast. Before you started Bootcamp, what did you want to have happen after Bootcamp? And then what actually happened?
Yeah, that's interesting. Not a lot, really, because I think I always thought I was going to just set up my own. I was a bit frustrated with contracting, because the thing is about contracting, although it's great experience and everything, you never really have the greatest sense of fulfillment, because you're working a project here, a project there. As a contractor, you're not really getting any of the credit for that project. It's the permanent team that get the credit. And I just sort of felt like I wanted to have my own little, piece of something. I think I lacked a lot of what was that one thing I wanted to do. And, I really struggled with this for a lot of years, and it's only sort of come into place in the last few years. And I think that's because I kind of had ideas and then, somebody else is doing that now. And so I'd kind of like, I can't do it now. Or they did it and it wasn't so successful, so maybe mine won't be so successful. Or, I really like that idea, but it's not going to make enough money. So, why bother doing it if it's not going to make enough money? Which are all valid things, like things to say about, starting up a business. But then I think there's a lot to be said for progress over perfection. So, like, I'm a strong believer now that everyone should have a side hustle. Everyone should be, doing something on the side. And so what? Like, even if that's just a blog that you're writing and your mum reads, like, so what if it doesn't make any money? So what if it doesn't? The thing is in life, like I said before, that you don't know where that's going to head you. It's all good and well to have goals. Like, I'm a strong believer in setting goals and hitting goals, but you can't control life at the same time. So if you're doing something that you enjoy, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it because you enjoy it. Whether it's going to make you money or not shouldn't be the factor of, I don't want to put my time into it because it's never going to be a big business. Because what will happen is that will become something else. Like, I always use the example of Richard Branson. He didn't start an airline. He didn't start all the things. He started in a student magazine. And everything else was just like, maybe then this added, then this added, then this added. And that's what life is. Like, people who say, I woke up, was 5 years old and decided that I was going to be this, and then I became this. That's never the story. That's never the story. So you've always just got to do something, even if it's something small or something big. And I think that's what I was tripping up on all those years, was that I had to come up with a great idea that I knew was going to make me money, that was new, which is a valid thing to say. But at the same time, I kind of think, had I started what I'd started here in Australia years ago, I would have been miles ahead. And I just thought, like, I was selling templates, like business templates, designed templates to people. And that's all I thought. I thought it was just a little thing. And it's grown from there, and it's grown from there. And people have asked me for help, and people have asked me how I do this and how I do that. And then it's like, wow, now I have something. Whereas I just thought, I'll just make a little bit of money by selling a few like designed templates online. And that's escalated and become something completely different, to the point where I'm like, wow, I'm quite happy where I'm at now. So, yeah, I think, what was the question again?
So
Sorry.
This is a good sign. That's fine. This is a great sign, Stacker, when we forget what we're talking about. It was what did you think you would do after boot camp, and then what you actually did after boot camp?
I think through the boot camp experience, I thought I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be making a product, because I still wasn't that sure. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have to fork out a lot of money and hire developers. And then I hadn't even factored into what I know now, that you also need a sales team and a marketing team and everything else on top of that. And I went back to contracting, and a few months after I actually got married, literally probably like 2 months, my husband and I finally got married. And I just went back to contracting, and then we were just making our plans to get the hell out of London, really. Like, we'd had enough. I'd been in London, I think of over 12 years in London, and it was very much a love-hate relationship. Love, 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 hate. Like, my time in London. I think I got a little bit bored of my career, and I just like, yeah, it's time for bluer skies and warmer weather. So, yeah, and then nothing really changed. I moved here and continued contracting, and found it quite different. My first contract wasn't that different. The second contract, which I stayed at for a year, was very different, and disturbingly so. And then it wasn't.
How so?
Well, it's kind of like, so I live in the third biggest city in Australia, which is basically a small city, so 2 million. No, I don't even live in there. I live an hour out of the third biggest city in Australia. So I live an hour out of Brisbane. So it's about 2 million people. But which, in New Zealand, that wouldn't be a small city. But for some reason, it feels very small. And I think UX had sort of become a little buzzword. And so I was working for I got a contract for a rather large Australian corporation. And they obviously had heard the buzzword UX, and they're like, we need to hire a UX designer. And I'm like, okay. So I get the position. I worked there. Then there was no other designer. There was just developers. And so I'm like, okay, first things first, let's test the product. Let's look what we've got, and let's get in front of users. Users? Oh, you can't do that. And I'm like, how do I be a user experience designer if you won't let me talk to users? And literally, it was like a battle of wills. I think there was a lot of a feeling of the upper management scared that I was going to change their baby, like that I was going to have too much control over the product. And it was actually being produced for a government organisation, which probably also didn't help. And the organisation liked to say, that this is what we want, this is what we want, this is what we want. And we're like, but what do the users want? And they're like, well, who cares what the users want? We're telling you what. It was very much this kind of like, and I couldn't fathom why they brought on, and I actually had meetings where I explained what UX was, in the meetings to try and, get through it. I was just kind of, no, it was slightly frustrating. I'm not saying that all of Australia is like that. I definitely think there's some, really great companies coming out of Melbourne and Sydney who, understand UX process and know what they're doing. And there's a few here in Brisbane as well. But I do think that it's become a little bit of a buzzword. We must hire one of those and get her in the
Mm.
seat, but not let her actually do her job. So, I mean, I actually, people just thought UX was UI design. Like, that's what they thought
Yeah.
it was. And I'm like, no, like, the UI is making things look, the UX is finding out what the users want. And
Mm.
yeah, a lot of not understanding that. So yeah, there's still a lot of frustration in my career, definitely moving over here. And I was kind of like, is this really what, I've traded London for? I've traded the blue skies and the sunny weather for like a career where I'm going to be fighting battles all the time. And it was at that point that I had my first daughter, and yeah, and then I just kind of everything changed from there. Like I realized that I can't be commuting into the city all the time and just spending all this time on, because like contractors don't get car parks, right? So I'm always on the train and having to commute into the city. Built this great house outside of the city because we want to be close to a beach, of course. And yeah, and then it's like I'm spending all my time. I had my daughter. My husband works kind of long hours, so I'd have to pick her up from daycare. And I remember having this sort of like 6-month part-time contract when she was first born, or like 6 months old, and just being like, somebody being like, Caron, can I talk to you? And I'd be like, I've really got to go, because otherwise daycare's going to shut and my daughter's just like left at daycare, and I'm going to like, because that hour, it was actually even an hour and a half commute with that job to get home. And it was just this constant state of stress, leaving, getting her to take, I've got to get to work. And then like this constant state of stress. And then I'm just like, this isn't life. Like, honestly, everyone should do in life what they want. And so I think it was at that point, I'm like, no, I've got to start working from home. And that was pre-COVID. And COVID's just helped that. Helped that in a big way. But yeah. I think that was a turning point for me, where I'm like, no, I've got to really do something for myself. And I thought, right, think big, start small, and start something really small. And then everything just grew from there. Yeah.
That leads us nicely onto your own startup, your own company now. Now, everything you've done in the past, all of the contract gigs and UI UX design, even your bootcamp experience and the marketing experience you have, this must all be leading on to this, right? I mean, it must help tremendously.
Yeah, totally. So I have been doing a little bit of helping out doing marketing for companies as well. And what I've learned about marketing is that it's really not that dissimilar to UX. I think we like to give things labels and give things, like, this is what marketing is, this is what UX is. But ultimately, I would say what I do is I create stuff that people want, or I help people create stuff what people want. And that's what marketing is as well. Like, if you're trying to sell something, you need to answer those questions that the customer's thinking. So you could use a test, a sales page, and say, what's missing here? Or the testimonials are missing here. I want some social proof, I want a video. I want to know what's inside the product. I want to know how it's delivered to me. I want to know what time frame it's going to be delivered to me. Like all those questions that people have. If people have questions when they're trying to buy something, they're not going to buy. Like, people just go, oh, this is confusing. I don't know if it's right for me. And they just leave and they forget about it and it's gone, And so marketing is exactly the same as UX. That's the thing. Like, it's just finding out what are the questions that people have when they're going to buy, or that they have about this product, or the objections that they have, and how you can overcome them. So yeah, I think once I understood that, I was just like, well, what in life is not that? What in life, especially when you're selling something or making something, it's all for the end user. That's really, really an important lesson. A particular book, I'll give you a book recommendation, which if you haven't read it is just amazing. It's called Story Brand. It was written by a guy called Donald Miller, and believe it or not, he actually was a script writer. And he discovered that the whole kind of there's a hero's journey when you're writing a script. He discovered that you can apply that to other things in life. So big mistake lots of people make when they're selling online is they position themselves as an expert, when really they need to position themselves more as a guide. So in every story, every film, every movie you watch, you'll see that there are, like, Star Wars is a great example because you've got Yoda, right? Yoda is the guide to Luke. So if the guide comes in and tells you what to do. So if you're trying to sell to somebody, you don't want to be the hero. You want to be the guide, because always your customer is always the hero. I don't know if that concept makes, if I've explained that well, but I think ultimately what I'm saying is that it's always the person who's the number one person is the person who's going to buy from you, or subscribe to you, or whatever that is. That's your number one, and it's not you. You're just the Yoda character saying, use the Force.
I think you've blown my mind, Caron.
Yeah, it's a great book, and the book did blow my mind. In fact, so much so that I keep it on my desk and I refer to it every day.
Oh, nice one.
So yeah, a must read for everyone. Like, it is a marketing book, but he talks about, it really crosses over into UX as well, because he actually talks about wireframing and good website and stuff. And I would say, like, if you're doing your own business of any sort, that book is a must, like a total must.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I think definitely, as I'm getting more and more into it myself now as well, I think definitely storytelling, that's a very important part of salesmanship, as you say, and marketing, and also mindset. You've mentioned it. Almost everyone I've spoken to has mentioned it in one way or another. Mindset is so important.
Oh, big time. Like, I can look like, there'll be certain things in your life that you're holding on to that you don't realize. Like, me and my dad, when I was a teenager, were at lockerheads because he was like, "You're never going to make money as a creative." That was always what he told me. He said to me, and I always bring this up to my dad whenever I see him. I'm like, "Do you remember, Dad, when you told me I should become a typist, because then I'll have a career?" Yeah, do you remember you told me that what I should do is become a typist? Like, I'm glad I didn't listen to that advice. But I think there's those things, because I literally was brought up saying that you're never going to make money out of being a creative. And I was like, as a kid, that's what I love, painting and drawing, and photography and drama and all, that's where my heart lied. But I was told, no, like, that, keep that as a hobby. And I do sort of feel that maybe if I hadn't been told that, maybe things could have been different for me earlier. Like, it's taken me so long to go, no, look at all these people who've made money. And that's how you get over that mindset. First, you've got to recognize that you've got, like, a problem with your mindset. And quite often it can come from your parents, but it can come from other places, come from internally as well. Like, what things were you told that you can't do? And then once you've identified what it is, you need to prove it wrong to yourself. And, like, journaling things out and being like, okay, so why is that wrong? Well, who's made money? Like, Andy Warhol made a bit of money out of art, didn't he? Like, there's these, things that have been told. And it's interesting, when I first started trying to make money online as well, and my daughter was a baby, and I had, like, lots of relatives coming over from the UK and coming over to New Zealand being like, "What are you doing, Caron?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, well, I'm, like, just building templates for small businesses so they, don't have to engage in designers and marketers, so they can, bootstrap their business and learn quickly and get up and running quickly." They'd be like, "Yeah, do people actually buy stuff online?" sort of thing. And I'm like, I kind of always had this display. And I'm sure it's just their concerns, but it's so funny how you take it on board and you think, yeah, maybe they're right. Maybe it's just go and get a job in the city and forget about that little dream that I had, But everyone's got mindset blockers, so yeah.
I'm sure we're not disparaging typists. I'm sure they do great work.
Do they still exist?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't know, Stacker.
It could be I remember being at that boot camp and being like this, and I've been sitting in front of computers since the age of about 12. I'm still like, tick, 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 tick. Maybe I should have done that typing, me coding.
Yeah. No, I think you made the right choice. So Now tell me about your venture. This is caronstacerayly.com.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put a link in the show notes so people can find it. Tell me about it. What are you doing?
Yeah, so I kind of had two websites actually. So yeah, that's my, let's say it's my consulting website, and I'm just really passionate about people embracing their creativity. So I built this website out of the things that I believe in life, and one is being lean. So starting your business and not forking out thousands and thousands of dollars, because it's got to be lean to start off with, because you've got to test the market. That's the UX principle, right? So I have, I've worked for quite a few people who've come to me and they've gone, oh, I need help with my app, for example, and they've already spent, who knows, 50K on it already, and they didn't realize they needed a UX designer, and they went straight to development, and they've got this wonky product, and it's like, look, like there's ways, let's try and do this lean. Let's not but go out and fork out all this money. There are ways to do things lean, and testing your market, whether they're even just being a prototype and testing first. So, yeah, it's me giving advice to people who want to launch businesses and how they can do it and what is the best way to do it. I mean, there are certain businesses, of course, you're going to spend a lot of money in, but there are ways that you can do it to minimize those costs. So my principles are lean, so keeping things lean, definitely to begin with until you get to the growth phase, and mindset, making sure that your mindset's good and in a good position. And the last thing is like growth. And I think growth, rather than being like, often people think, okay, I've built the product, now I grow. What tends to happen in a business is that you go through this building phase, and then you grow, and then you grow, and then you refine again. So it's actually more of a cycle. Growth is more of a cycle where you make decisions in the business which will help grow the business. And sometimes it doesn't. And then, and if it does, then you go forward, and it's still an iterative circle, the growth phase. So so I kind of use those principles, and like I do a mixture of like coaching. I want to move towards doing online courses, because a lot of what I've discovered is that, well, these people are trying to start businesses, right? And they're trying to save money. So it's, if I can keep those costs down, because of course, consulting with me over business ideas can become expensive. So for me, my ultimate goal with my consulting business is to move it more online and more accessible to people who have lower budgets. And that this whole thing has kind of been an extension of what I started when my daughter was born, which was Get Nice Templates, which was just a shop where I did things like planners, like one of my best sellers was like a brand planner. So you're starting a new business, you need a brand, like how do you come up with your brand without spending a fortune? And you can do a lot of that work yourself. Now, I'm not talking about the logo itself, but I'm talking about like the ethos behind the brand. So like if you understand what your brand is and who your target market is, then you can start refining things like your colors and your, what your website stands for and what your message is. So, things like that. So people can buy that workbook, work through it themselves, and get so much more further ahead themselves than what they would like if they just hand it off, spend thousands and hand it off to a branding designer. So there's a lot of DIY in it. And for me, I think that's really important, because life is like a way between time and money. And if you're like not a designer, but you don't have the money, you're kind of in a stuck position already before you're in the get-go. You're not a marketing expert, you're not a designer, but you want to launch a company. Like, use templates. Seriously, use templates. Do things cheaply, and then when it starts to grow, then you can start spending the money. Don't go out and spend $5,000 on a brand before you've even made your first cent. It really doesn't make sense, because your target market might change as well. You might think your target market's something, but then when you start selling stuff, then your market's changed, and then you're like, actually, I think the brand, so. Most designers will probably hate me for it, but like honestly, use template systems, use whatever you can that you can get up and running cheaply, because what you're doing is you're testing the market, and that's a UX principle. You're testing whether people buy this. If you don't know, like you could be so confident but nobody knows. No, not even a UX professional. Nobody's going to know. You have to test the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point there. Everything has to be validated quick and early, right?
Yes.
You might as well fail soon if you're going to fail.
100%. And you know what? The best way to validate is actually getting people to put their hands in their pockets as well. Because it's interesting, because I have noticed over my career, you can do a lot of user testing face-to-face and stuff, and you think you've got something, but it's actually when they actually put their hands in the pocket and start paying for things, that can sometimes be different. And I think actually face-to-face user testing falls down a little bit there. I always used to do the spiel. Don't worry, I'm not the designer. You're not going to offend me. I don't care what you say. Just slag this off as much. If you don't like it, don't like it. Because people don't want to say sometimes what they really think to your face. And the ultimate test is will they buy it? Anyone launching a product, even if you can do pre-sales, before you've even made the product. It's why things like Kickstarter and stuff are so brilliant, because you can test the market before you go through with it. And that's what every business should be doing. No matter what you're doing, you need to make sure if there's something out there before you go for it. Stop wasting money.
Yeah. What you're doing now, helping creatives, this really marries all of your skills and experience up very well. And it's an amazing thing that you're doing for people, because there's people out there who could have similar skills as you, and you're enabling them to sort of go out there and start a side hustle and start a little bit of side income, right?
100%. Yeah, definitely. And I think my ultimate goal, my main value is that I want people to take control of their lives. I really do. I think there's some things in life that made me really sad. And say, for example, when I got married, I had a friend who couldn't come because her boss wouldn't let her have the time off work. Sorry, that makes me really sad. Or people who miss their children growing up because they, spend so much time at work and doing this and, having to go in after hours and all that sort of thing. Come on, people. We need to take control of our lives. Work is important, but it shouldn't control you, and it's really important that we as people take a little bit of control back. And that's what being self-employed is. And even if it's just a side hustle, it's something burning away that can grow into something bigger, and everyone needs to do it. I do think that we're coming into a little bit of a revolution. I think COVID's probably helped push this along a little bit, really helped the kind of work from home, the remote ethos, and the kind of the side hustle things. Just got more important now. So, here's to the future of remote working.
This has been brilliant. Thank you so much for your time and your really candid answers. I've had a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been great to catch up with you. And
likewise. You promised me, since you're not going to do any coding with me, that you'll do more podcasts.
Yeah, I would like to, actually. I've got to use that master's degree in radio that I've never used.
You do, indeed. You need to. We didn't even have. I have so many questions for you that we didn't have time to get to. So we need to get you on again.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that.
Yeah, I want to learn so much more about marketing and podcasts from you.
Yeah, definitely.
And lead generation, something that you've been talking about.
Definitely.
On your site.
Yeah, definitely. Lead generation, super important. Yeah, I could talk a lot more about marketing. I quite like marketing. I used to think it was sleazy, but marketing's just UX with a different name.
Well, we'll have you on again soon. But before I let you go, I need the joke of the show.
Oh, no. Okay. What was my joke? How many digital entrepreneurs does it take to screw in a light bulb?
I don't know. How many digital entrepreneurs does it take to screw in a light bulb?
None. They've automated it all.
Hey, nice. I love it. On topic and terrible. Thank you, Caron.
Terrible. Thank you so much, Sanjay.
This has been wonderful. Cheers.
Cheers. See you later.
And that's all, folks. Thanks a lot for tuning in. For more info, for questions, comments, or feedback, please head on over to aheadintech.com and don't forget to subscribe.